Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Ian White Maher. If you're new here, please come say hello to me after the service. I'll be standing by the welcome table. I'd love to welcome you and just say hello and learn a little bit more about you. We have a couple of announcements. I'll figure out what I did with them. So they left me alone this week. Normally I have people that help and do things, and it just means you get an extra long sermon. You're welcome. Yeah. We just had a beautiful ceremony for the tree that has died over by our memorial garden. It was really lovely. Christine Ashworth and others sort of led us through a goodbye ceremony, and it was quite touching. Teams Night is coming up April 22nd. There will be pizza, there will be salad, there will be water. So swing by the swig if you need something. I just learned what that was, by the way. Now I feel like I just say it like I know what it was. But I just learned. It's cool. There's a memorial service for Barbara Woody on Saturday, April 30th, next Saturday at 11 a.m. We have a number of volunteers for our Pride booth. This year, normally we march in Pride, but this year we actually have a booth, and we're putting together a team to talk about what kind of experience we have in the booth. So we don't want to just do hey, here's our pamphlet. We want to create an experience. So if you want to get in on how to create an experience in the Pride booth, please come. There's slots to sign up. According to Alexis, the later slots are where all of the fun happens. Is that correct?
I don't think I was the one who thought that up, but I like the idea of it.
I'm going to credit Alexis anyway. We're looking for someone who wants to lead our picnic on June 12th. We have that day set aside. But if you would like to help put together that picnic, you can email Stephanie at administrator@slcuu. Also, in the Torch this week, there is a music survey. So if you want to get fill it out, because we want to hear from you. And we have a sneak peek coming up for our summer forum on May 19th at 7 p.m. It's called Stories from Topaz. I just learned what this was. If you don't know, Topaz was the Japanese internment camp that was here in Utah during World War II. So if you want to learn more about what happened here in Utah, what happened at the internment camp, May 19th, 7 p.m., they'll be talking about that, and then also, I guess, in the summer forum. And finally, I want to share with you that there is a very special guest, a very sanctified individual. It is my mother. She is here. If you like how this ministry has been going, she's responsible. If you don't like it, she tried her best. She's right back there. There you go. Yeah. She's great. Also not responsible for anything I'm about to say. Those are our announcements. So let's begin our worship with this Earth Day prayer by Laura Horton Ludwig. Spirit of life, Spirit of earth, Spirit of all that breathes and all that is, we love you. We love this planet and its people and its beings. We love this interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. We love it all, and we want it all to be well and blessed and healthy. But we are human. And as people, our hearts are still small. So often our love and our sincere desire for the well-being of all is not yet enough to restrain our collective desire for more for ourselves. More money, more power, more things. So often, we act in the service of that desire in more ways that harm our fellow beings with whom we share this earth. And so often, even when we would do otherwise, we feel powerless. The problems are so big, the scale so enormous. What can one person or one small group do? But today, let our prayer be for hope and commitment to stay in the struggle and to do what is right as best as we can each day, to love you, Spirit of earth and ocean, stars and rocks, beings of every kind, to love this glorious whole as we love ourselves. For we are you, and you are us. Blessed be. Sort of in our sped up order of service today, we have arrived already at the Offertory. I've talked about this a couple of times. I talked about it in the first service. Oh my goodness. Who did that? Did you do this? Who did this? Oh, one of the ladies in green. I love it. So I made a joke in the first service that there was a cup up here that was full of water and it was pink, and I was like, oh my God, it's for me. Turns out it was just left over from like some other service. I was like, oh, it's not for me. But now, for Ian Hart. Whoever it was, thank you. So the Offertory is not actually how we take in most of our money. I think you guys know this, right? Like, mostly we take it in through pledges. But the Offertory is kind of rehearsal. It's a worship element, right, about what it means to give, what it means to think about giving to something that you support. It's not that the money that comes in on the plate is inconsequential, it's meaningful, truly. But it also is there, it can be something that you just go, right, just put it in and not think about what it is. Or it can be one of those things where you put it in, you place it, and you say, right, I am contributing to this thing that I believe in, this community that I believe in, this movement that I believe in, this idea of transformation. Like, who are we? We're not a building. We're not, like, what are we doing? What do you believe in? Who do you want to be? So I invite you really just to take it on almost like a practice, like a spiritual just moment as the plate comes by, just to say what you believe in as you place it in the box. Or as you scan the QR code, which is probably not as like typically spiritual. There is a little QR code, you can be like, I believe in this. But, you know, take it on as you will. And we'll now accept the Offertory, and I invite you to really just put yourself in it. Thank you. I'm going to do that a lot today, just because of the heart. It hailed yesterday, and I was just moving my jackets downstairs to be like, oh, I don't need these anymore. But I know that spring has arrived because my allergies have kicked in. But I will say, I am actually so grateful to be living here because there are actually some real forests around here, and I think that actually is much better for my allergies. When I was living in New York, they were totally debilitating. Like a whole week, the whole first week I was really out while my medication decided. I was like, oh, I know what this is. Where's that Flonase? And part of this is because cities have a heavier concentration of carbon dioxide, and parks and rec departments like to plant male trees pollen-producing trees over female trees, seed-producing trees, because they leave a lot less mess on the ground. Salt Lake City does this too, right? Liberty Park, Sugar House Park, even the trees that are planted on the sidewalks have a lot more pollen-producing trees than seed-producing trees because it's designed for recreation and for easy cleanup. Now, my guess is that my allergies are better here because we're surrounded by these forests that are able to absorb some of the extra pollen. But I never actually experienced allergies before moving to New York. My first year there, I was like, God, this cold won't go away. And I was working at this church in Manhattan, and the administrator was like, it's New Jersey. All the pollen comes over from New Jersey, which is like, I have learned is not exactly accurate, but very classic New York, right? And I don't know, maybe I experienced allergies before that, but I grew up in New Hampshire, maybe it was just more imbalanced, like the trees were just in more imbalance, and I didn't notice. The only reason I bring all of this up, aside from you feeling sympathy for me, is that we have such a powerful effect on the planet today through our actions that it's really hard to understand all of the consequences. It makes sense when someone points out that if we plant 4 times as many pollen-producing trees as seed-producing trees, that we're going to have this abundance of pollen just in the air. And when you introduce an excess of carbon dioxide, like we do in cities, trees are going to respond really well to that. So from this vantage point, we might ask ourselves, like, what are we doing? Because this is a nationwide behavior. This isn't just something New York does, not something that Salt Lake City does. Like, why are we planting more pollen-producing trees than seed-producing trees? And, I would like to believe that some people in Parks and Rec talk about it. I'm also willing to believe that creating an environment of excess pollen was really just an oversight, not something that was known and then just ignored. Maybe that's me being generous. Maybe the Parks and Rec department knew that planting all of these trees would cause increased suffering for people with allergies, but weighed that against the cost of park cleanup, and they just decided for less cleanup. But I'm of the mind that most of the detrimental effect that we're having on the environment is due to ignorance, not maliciousness, right? There is malicious behavior for sure. There are people and companies driven by short-term greed, driven by self-seeking and self-interest, and these are people who know what they're doing is bad, and they do it anyway. In the first service, I was telling you about how I used to work as a waiter, and I remember going to a table one time and talking to the guy there, and he was just like, yeah, I just send chemicals to Jamaica. That was it. I was like, to do what? To do what? He's like, no, just to get rid of them. I was like, oh, huh. And we often live in compromised situations, right? I was trying to earn money. I was working, so you want a tip, right? So you're not like, well, that's a terrible thing to do. You're a terrible person, right? But, there are bad people out there who are just doing things that they know are bad, right? He knew it. But I think most of what we're doing to the planet happens from unintended consequences. I certainly understand the logic of planting fewer seed-producing trees in a city. Right? We want to keep the sidewalks clean. We want to have pleasant places to lie out. You want to be able to go to Sugar House Park and just stretch out without having the ground be full of pine cones or whatever. And as someone who suffers from allergies, I'm not sure that I would have personally thought through all of the consequences that are ultimately so personal to me. And this is one of the reasons that the environmental challenge that we face is so incredibly complex. Whether we like it or not, whether we think it is just or not, the world is now in the care of human beings. It's now in our care. All of our actions dictate and determine the life of all the other beings on this planet. All of the so-called free space is circumscribed by human behavior. There is no free space, really. Some nihilists may preach that the earth will, have her day and humans will learn the real meaning of powerlessness in the face of an angry or, just adjusting planet. But I'm really not drawn to that line of thinking. I'm not drawn there. There are consequences, yes. Yeah? And if we want to survive as a species, and if we want other species to survive, then we must dive into our motivations that guide our behavior, which include our spiritual condition. The most destructive behaviors are easy to see. Oil and gas industries are digging up long-buried carbon and sending it into the atmosphere, heating up the planet. The animal agriculture industry, the animals farmed for our consumption, is the leading cause of deforestation in the world and produces more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation industry. We know the oceans are being emptied. We know the mountains of plastic are piling up. These are consequences that exist right in front of our eyes. These are the ones that we see so clearly, but behind them, kind of like the planting of trees that we're just like, we should have clean sidewalks. Behind them are thousands, if not millions of other less visible consequences that are derivative of our behavior. There's this new willingness within some environmental Christian communities to substitute the earth for Jesus on the cross as a way of helping Christians understand what we are doing and who we are killing. And part of our behavior does remind me of a passage from Luke that captures Jesus' final words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." As smart as we are, as capable as we are, as earnest as I believe most people are, we do not know what we are doing. And it's only because calamity is now staring us in the face that we are looking up from our hands, wondering how it got to this. The president of the UUA, Susan Frederick Gray, released a video just the other day saying we have 12 years before it's irreversible. That's not very long. As a minister reflecting on the significance of environmental collapse, as someone who eyes the human capacity to rescue ourselves through material progress cautiously, and as someone who believes in spiritual transformation, I wonder why more people of faith are not incorporating a larger spiritual component into their recognition of Earth Day. Last summer, Governor Cox asked us to pray for rain in an effort to alleviate the drought the state was experiencing and has been experiencing for many years. It's like a decade we're in this drought, right? And he was derided for it. I understand why. I don't think that prayer works that way. Additionally, the request was incredibly shallow and self-centered, right? Perhaps if he had included a request for people to pray for the closure of that environmental fiasco that's called Lake Powell, or that, is so low now it doesn't even generate water, right? It just is an evaporation pond. So people can drive boats. Or for people to eat less beef so that we wouldn't use so much of our precious water on the alfalfa used to feed them. Maybe that prayer would have been more meaningful. But it was a prayer for more water so that we can just continue to exploit, which is just stupid. It's just a stupid request. Rain so we can just consume more. That's whatever, dummy. Honestly, that's just so dumb. And while I don't believe those acts of prayer really do anything beyond relieving the person offering the prayer from any sense of responsibility for the calamity, and while it should be mocked as cheap grace, we need help right now. We need help. And the cultivation of the sacred relationship is necessary as a guide for our action. As I prepared for this sermon, I scrolled through Facebook. I was doing research. I was not avoiding writing at all. I searched for the hashtag Earth Day. That's my research. And there was a lot of stuff, but for me anyway, there was a very glaring omission. Everything was focused on action. I found nothing about spiritual discipline. Goose egg. And I don't just mean like in my friends who were popping up when I did that, or other activists. This included messages from the Pope, right, who championed the environmental cause, but it was entirely action-focused, not spiritually focused at all. I found this lovely, lovely passage from the late Thich Nhat Hanh calling for us to fall in love with the planet. But he didn't say how. He didn't say, take on a meditation practice so that you can see through the impermanence of your ego so you can fall in love with the planet. He didn't offer any spiritual discipline. Just fall in love with the planet. Go fall in love with the planet. We're just like, well, how do I do that? I don't know. And perhaps a little closer to home, right? The Unitarian Universalist Environmental Ministry created a list of ways to engage the environment and people, but not one of them outlined how to cultivate our relationship with the planet through spiritual disciplines. Following that hashtag, I did see an amazing array of examples of people doing inspiring work, really inspiring work. And I think this is actually one of the great examples of the positive influence of social media. You can see all of the things people are doing around the world, if you choose, right? Grassroots movements of people planting trees around the world, feeling in solidarity with other people who are planting billions of trees. Farmers who are sharing stories about how they learned how to take better care of the earth because they had to find a way to resist Monsanto, right? And their point being that resistance wasn't enough, that learning more about the earth was really important and life-enriching. And several people promoted movies about our consumption of meat and how the planet that we are deforesting to satisfy our hunger is just, running away from us. And it was an amazing mix of exciting actions and education and activism, but no spirituality. In times of crisis, like the drought that we are facing right now, we need to spring into action. Action, there is right action and there is right behavior. There is a problem and there are things that we can do. And wedding our activism with a spiritual perspective, I believe, is what will make the difference. Prayer is as important as action. Our ability to behave the way we do with the planet is, in my opinion, due to the absence of an authentic spiritual relationship with the planet. There is a spiritual dislocation that allows us to think that there is such a thing as a me and a you. as a me and an it, as an us and an it. But there is not. We are of the earth. The only thing is we have forgotten, and in our forgetting, we behave in ways that have consequences that are beyond our knowing. The world is facing an environmental collapse of such a magnitude that they are now calling it the sixth extinction. And they've named it after us, right? They call it the Holocene extinction, the Holocene period being the human period. The Holocene extinction, because its roots can be found in the rise of humanity. Unlike the previous extinction events, the Earth is now conscious of the massive climate change and species depletion. Humanity is the consciousness of the Earth, and we are standing wide-eyed as we watch this extinction unravel before us. And many blame the impending collapse on human actions, but this is only partially correct. Right? The effects that we are facing today and tomorrow are determined by our actions. But our actions are the products of decisions and choices that we make. And the quality and the condition of the decisions and choices that we make are derivative of our thinking. And our thinking is determined by our spiritual condition. If you think that you are separate, you will act as if you are separate. If you think that you are interwoven, you will act as if you are interwoven. To say the impending collapse is the consequence of our actions conveniently avoids our responsibility for cultivating our spiritual condition, which is the source of the cascade of all that follows. The extinction event is the ultimate consequence of the misaligned spiritual condition of human beings, which allows us to prioritize the fulfillment of short-term individual desires over short-term individual sacrifices, which would provide long-term survival and prosperity for our species and other species. Scientific discoveries made over the past century have opened us up to this exciting new awareness of our origins as living beings, but we have lagged behind in formatting these new discoveries into a theological framework that help us resolve the anxiety and alienation that we feel as human beings, which propels us towards fulfilling individual desires and has contributed to the current crisis that we now face. We're just lagging behind what we know spiritually. Our first step, and I ripped this right from AA, so 12-step people. Our first step towards the solution is, does anyone throw it out? To admit that we have a problem, right? We have a problem. We are beyond the point of avoiding calamitous climate change. It's here. We cannot begin our process of transformation into healing beings without admitting that our spiritual estrangement has created an environment that will soon be unlivable for us. The next step is admitting that we need help. We need help. Specifically, we need help from the divine, the creative life force, whatever you want to call it, that is greater than the selfish interests of my own individual ego. Anything shy of this confession will leave us with the illusion that we will somehow, with the power of Elon Musk, find our way, right? With power and ingenuity to solve this problem. He's not bringing all of you to Mars with him. He's leaving most of you here, right? We cannot solve a spiritual problem with intellectual solutions. It just doesn't work that way. You cannot think yourself into surrender. It doesn't happen. And it's not that I prioritize prayer over action, but neither do I prioritize action over prayer, right? The state of the world is a consequence of our best thinking, our industriousness, right? Our best thinking has brought us to this moment that we're experiencing right now. It's kind of a problem, our best thinking. Unmediated action is not going to lead us into a solution because it does not create the pathway for falling in love with the planet, with the earth. It does not create the empathetic connection that dissolves the separation that we feel. Hollow prayers offered to alleviate the responsibility of the person rather than solve the problem is cheap grace. Action without spiritual intention or commitment to a greater consciousness. Giving yourselves over to the process of greater consciousness. Without doing that, it's a hamster wheel. We got to recycle this, and then we got to do this. It's hard to get people to take action. It's really hard to get people to pray and meditate for global consciousness. Mostly because they're jerks, and I don't want to be conscious with them. Right? But both of these things must be done if we want our actions to have purpose, if we want our species and other species to survive. But how would our actions change, truly, if we repeated passages from the Upanishads inviting us to seek the divine in everything we see? Just look out the window with me. Look at that tree. And hear these words. Let us adore the luminous, who is in fire, who is in water, who is in plants and trees, who pervades the whole universe. How would our day change? How would our actions change if we said that before we acted? How would our days change if each morning we bowed to the earth, repeating the lines from the Vedas? O God, thou art in the sandbanks as well as in the midst of the currents. I bow to thee. Thou art in the little pebbles as well as in the calm expanse of the sea. I bow to thee. O all-pervading God, thou art in the barren soil and in the crowded places. I bow to thee. How would we reimagine our responsibilities if we took on the practice of repeating the Quran throughout the day? Have you not seen all those who are in heaven and the earth and the birds on the wing sing the praises of God? Each one knows its obligations and duties. And God knows whatever they do. And what if, on each of our hikes through this stunning wilderness, you live in a cathedral? A cathedral. What if on our hikes we chanted the Hebrew scriptures like a mantra, but ask the animals and they will teach you? The birds of the air and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth and they will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you. What would happen if that were our practice? We have been honoring Earth Day for 52 years. And we should invite action into our lives. We need action. But also let your action be guided by prayer, by intentional spiritual discipline designed to bring you into communion with the planet that we come from, the planet that we grew out of, like the grass, like that very tree. We have the same origin. No alien dropped you here. You grew out of this planet. Fall in love with the planet absolutely. And we do that not by seeing ourselves as separate from it, but in it. This is your body, this is your blood, this is your mind, this is your spirit. Embrace the God experience of this creation. We love to point fingers at the Republicans. because they're easy targets. They don't make it hard at all, right? And we love to talk about how terrible Chevron and ExxonMobil and BP are, right? And they give copious evidence of their sociopathy. And we cannot change them today. But we can change us. I used to pray to become vegan. I would pray. Please. Truly, I did. I wanted my actions to be aligned with my values, but I couldn't shift. I lived in New York and I loved that pizza, right? I was like, I can't give it up. I loved it so much. Or I thought I did. I thought I was attached to something, right? I had all of the evidence that my intellect could ever need to satisfy something, which is why it is such a fool's errand to run up to these Republicans and be like, here's my evidence. They already have it. They know. They don't care. You're not going to convince them with evidence. You're going to convince them in another way. We humans are not that rational. We love to think we are, and you use especially. We're like, we're the most rational of all the humans. But we're actually emotional. We're emotional. I knew about all the horrific suffering of the animals, right? I knew about all of the undocumented workers that are forced to work in the Tyson plants, so that our chicken is cheap, and how all of them are suffering from PTSD and have like an inability to feel today because they have to like kill on such a fast rate, like kill. I knew that our rivers are disappearing. I drove across, the country, and I got here. I was so excited to come through on, I think it's 70, because I wanted to see the Colorado River. Can I tell you how sad I was when I saw it? That thing did not carve the Grand Canyon. That thing is neutered. It's sad. I was like, oh my God. It was beautiful in a way, but it was like sad also. The rivers are disappearing to make soy and alfalfa for animals. I knew that animal agriculture created greenhouse gas, more greenhouse gas than the transportation industry. I knew this intellectually, but spiritually I was not ready. So I wrote about wanting to be vegan. I preached about it, right? I couldn't let go. So I prayed. I prayed to be aligned, that my values would align with what I wanted for the planet. And then one day it happened. It was not a special day. There was nothing new. I didn't see anything shocking. It was unremarkable in every way. And it wasn't even that a desire had to be, the desire was lifted. It was just the voice telling me that I couldn't do it anymore was just gone, right? I was so happy to read the announcement from the UU Environmental Ministry this week that read, the greatest shift potential would come from us switching to plant-based diets. The greatest shift potential. I believe this. You cannot change the oil industry today, but you can change what you eat. But believe me, I know only too well. I used to make jokes. I loved pork so much that I used to be like, oh, God came down to the planet and kissed the earth and outgrew the pig. I used to say that joke all the time, right? I know what it means. Our attachments to what we eat is strong. Like for cultural reasons, just to start, right? I'm from New Hampshire. I'm from the seacoast. My mom makes a lobster Newburg for Christmas. Was it Christmas? Thanksgiving? Which one was it? Now I'm forgetting. Christmas. And I associate it with family. I associate it with being a Yankee. Like, there's food that I get in touch with. She makes a lentils and kielbasa thing that, as a child, I like it made me feel safe. You have your own food thing, right? I've heard about these funeral potatoes. I don't know. 7 different types of funeral potatoes, right? It's cultural. There's something really cultural. It's also very convenient. You know, you don't want to go out to a restaurant and they are like, here's a salad. That's our option. You want something else. And there's joy that we get. You know? The game is on. You want to eat some wings. I love that. I get it. And there are negative associations we have to overcome. I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to, I want to live the way I want to live. I don't want to be one of those jackass preachers who's like preaching about veganism from the pulpit. I don't want to be one of those people. It's also, very motivating to keep us on this path. There's a lot to overcome, which is why I find suggestions like this one from the UU Environmental Ministry somewhat anemic, as if we could just rationally make such a decision. I couldn't do it. We need help. We need spiritual help to find the relationship with the divine, with this magnificent creation that surrounds us. But when we encounter this relationship, when we drop away, when our self becomes less critical to us, it guides our activism. It guides our survival. So I do not dismiss Governor Cox's request that we pray for rain. We should pray for rain. We are in serious trouble. But prayer and rain are not a one-to-one relationship. We have no rain because of our decisions and choices. And the quality and the condition of our decisions and choices, it's derivative of our thinking. And our thinking is determined by our spiritual condition. To say that the impending collapse is a consequence of our actions conveniently avoids our responsibility for our spiritual condition, which is the source of the cascade that follows. For me, to pray for rain means that I pray to align my decisions and choices with the knowledge that I have about what's happening in the world. If those become aligned, rain will appear. It will appear. But this isn't something that a person can tell you. It's something that you have to experience for yourself. Unitarian Universalism has its own spiritual tradition. It's called transcendentalism, right? Where we have a direct encounter with the divine. That's why you don't need a minister. You don't need all you need is a willingness to encounter. There's this beautiful passage that I love. It's like a disc record way before there were disc records. But it's from Ralph Waldo Emerson's Divinity School address. And he goes, "I once heard a preacher who sorely tempted me to say I would go to church no more," which, some of you may be feeling right now. "Men go," thought I, "where they are wont to go, else had no soul entered the temple that afternoon. A snowstorm was falling all around us. The snowstorm was real, the preacher merely spectral. And the eye felt the sad contrast in looking at him, and then out the window behind him into the beautiful meteor of the snow. He had lived in vain. He had not one word intimating that he had wept or laughed, was married or in love, had been commended or cheated or chagrined. If he had ever lived or acted, we were none the wiser for it." That's such a great diss. Also very true. I believe what Emerson is saying is that words on a printed page can only do so much. The words of a preacher can only do so much. Reason can only do so much if you cannot see the majesty of this divine world. To be in awe. So please, on this Earth Day, go forth from this room and embrace the spiritual disciplines that help you take in all of the beauty of God, to know that you are not separate from it, to fall in love hopelessly, helplessly. It is from this place that we have a chance of making it. Amen. Source of life, God, my darling, inspire us with the power and the willingness to fall in love, to do the work of falling in love through whatever practice we have at our disposal that opens us to the worth and the dignity of every being. Awaken us to that great space of interwovenness beyond birth, beyond death, beyond the limitations of my ego and your ego, where we rest in the presence of Source. And fill us with grace so we might find the courage to do the hard things that lead us into such a path that guides our actions and our spirit in such a way that creates alignment with this beautiful planet. Amen. Happy Earth Day. Yeah. Beautiful. So the service has ended. If you're new, you can find me out by the welcome table. Please come say hello. All complaints, you can take them to the office. I want to thank Holly Stuart, Alison Christiansen, Connie Wilkerson, and Nikki Blackburn Fuller for cantoring for us today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. David Owens, our music director, thank you. Tristan, up there, bringing us to the world. Thank you so much. Blessed be. Come on out and let's have some fun.